Are there too many two-player games? Azul Duel has just released, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts about it as a consumer, board game lover, but also a store owner. And also, I'm going to talk about the industry trend of all these duels. My name's Steven. I own and operate House Rules Games, a small local game store in Dallas, Texas. Seven Wonders Duel was really the original Duel, not the original two-player game, obviously. There's plenty of two-player games before that. But it was basically the first game to take an existing title and duelize it. Seven Wonders obviously was a very famous game that came out, God, almost 20 years ago now. What, 15 years ago? It doesn't matter. Seven Wonders Duel came out 10 years ago and is now one of the most critically acclaimed two-player games ever released, and it sells way better than the original game now. The spirit of Seven Wonders Duel was that Seven Wonders went up to 7 players. The original had a goofy two-player rule set where the 2 players would alternate taking turns for a third dummy player. It was interesting, it was fine. It's just not really what it was made for. It was made to be played at least 3 players, especially because of how the military scoring works if you've ever played. So they came out with Seven Wonders Duel for 2 players only, and it's incredible. It's so good. It's one of my favorite two-player games I've played hundreds of times. It's so good, and I would recommend it in general. I think the industry was happy to just kind of let that be, have its own little lane. Oh yeah, Seven Wonders Duel, that's cute. It duelized a very large player count game. That's cool. And we didn't really get any duels for several years. And then, all of a sudden, it was like the bat signal went up in the industry a couple years back, and it was like, we're gonna make two-player games for everything. Azul Duel is just the most recent one of these, and the reason I wanted to talk about this game in particular, and also just the trend in general, is this, and Splendor to a certain degree, the original game is really good at 2. In fact, it's often recommended at 2 players specifically. So why did we get an Azul Duel for 2 players only? If you're only gonna play at 2, is it worth it? Let me work it, let me flip that thing over and reverse it. You know what I'm saying? I'm a real professional. In these last years, we've also seen Res Arcana Duel, Tokaido Duel. We're going to see Everdell Duel. This last year we had Splendor Duel, which has done very well, and I really highly recommend it. It's really, really good. But I thought the same thing about Splendor Duel. I thought Splendor's pretty good at 2. What are they doing? And I was blown away at Splendor Duel. I love Splendor Duel. It's so good. 3 win conditions, just like Splendor Duel, just like Seven Wonders Duel. It's the same designer after all. And now I don't want to play Splendor at 2 players even. And even at 3 or 4, Splendor Duel is so good. It added interaction, it adds some catch-up mechanisms in the other win conditions. It lets you sort of catch up indirectly. And I just love it. And I often, at the shop, recommend people get Splendor Duel instead of Splendor, like all the time. People are looking at Splendor and they go, oh, I've heard of this game, it's really cool. And I say, how many players are you gonna play at? And if you're really primarily gonna play 2, you should really just get Splendor Duel, because it's so good. But also, importantly, as a product, it's cheaper. For the store, the price point is lower. The original Splendor MSRP is for $40. Let me go down. The original Splendor MSRP is for $45. Splendor Duel MSRP is for $30. So you're saving 15 bucks just to get a better experience at 2 anyways. To me, it's a no-brainer. Now, with Azul Duel, this is a bit different. I came into this actually optimistic because of my good experience with Splendor Duel. Azul Duel adds some really cool things to the basic formula of Azul. It takes the tile pattern creation of Queen's Garden Azul, in that you are creating the pattern that you're placing on, which is cool, and I like that about Queen's Garden. It's probably one of my favorite versions of Azul. If I had to think about it, yeah, it's probably my favorite version of Azul, because it's complicated, and I like that. That's what I want. I want more stuff going on top of this core system. Some people don't want it, though, and that's where we're going to kind of get into some friction here. This adds a pretty decent amount of complexity to the system, which is good for someone like me. That's what I want. I find Azul to be kind of boring. Ooh, I don't really often recommend it. It's kind of like my one of my many hot takes about popular board games. I don't think Azul is very good for new hobbyists necessarily, because the scoring is kind of goofy. As a product, it's not very good. The boards are so flimsy. The scoring little cube, it's goofy. I don't know if you guys remember, but they made this Azul upgrade kit with like these plastic overlays that you could lay the tiles in to like make it better, and not such that if you bumped it once, your tiles would fly over the place. So they sold us sort of not a faulty product, that's dramatic, but they sold us a product at MSRP $40, which is just kind of okay. And then they're like, oh, well, what if we fixed our own problem, but sold it to you for whatever, $15, which kind of annoyed me, to be honest. So I don't often recommend Azul for various reasons. I find that the scoring is kind of a little goofy to teach. I find that the production value is not great. It is pretty, which is cool, but I'd rather just play Sagrada, and I often recommend people just get Sagrada or Harmonies now. This game came out last year, and I have been, you see why it's next. People look at Azul and I go, you should really get Harmonies. It's so good. It's got that tiling, puzzly aspect, but it's simpler, it's cheaper. I think it's just as pretty, if not a little prettier. It's more thematic. Azul is like, oh, tiles, pretty tiles. Okay, Harmonies, at least we're creating an ecosystem and animals. It's got a theme. So from that perspective, I don't really enjoy Azul that much. I don't recommend it. I don't play it myself. So I personally really like Azul Duel. I like the added complexity. I like the elements that it's added in on top of the base foundation of Azul. But if you appreciate the simplicity of base Azul, you probably won't like this, and you probably shouldn't get it, right? You should probably just play Azul at 2 players. Shout out Azul Mini. They made Azul Mini. This MSRP is for $20, and it's a better product than base Azul. It's half the price, and it's better. I don't know if you can really see this, but the board has it's like a clear Lego snap in, and all the tiles snap right in. It's like it's such a huge quality of life improvement on the production value and like the experience of like placing the tiles, and it's half the price. I'm gonna stop carrying base Azul. I just tell people to buy Azul Mini. Yeah, it's smaller and whatever, but like, it's just strictly better in my opinion. And so that's all sort of how I feel about it as a gamer, and now how I feel about it as a shop owner is still good. It's still good. I have so many people come in here and they say, hey, we're looking for a 2-player game. We're looking for a 2-player game. We're looking for a 2-player game. And this is easier to recommend to those people than regular Azul, because it's specifically designed for 2-player, which has an added hook of like, ooh, it's 2 players only. It's designed for you specifically to be played at 2. But also, again, it's cheaper as a product. So it's easier for you to get into. You could buy, with the savings, you could just buy another game. And that's probably what people do. Hopefully that's what people do. That's what I would do. Probably one of our most asked questions is, hey, what's a good game for 2 players? There's not a ton of, how do I say this? I am in a very busy sort of shopping area, so I get a lot of what I will say non-hobbyists, non-board gamers, right? Who grew up playing Monopoly and traditional card games, and that's their experience of board games, is traditional family games. Sort of the Americana classics. And very few of those were designed to be played at 2 players. Back in the day, it was a lot of war games for 2 players, which a casual consumer wouldn't be familiar with outside of like a Risk, but Risk is really still kind of intended to be a big epic multiplayer experience. So that type of consumer isn't familiar with just how many 2-player games there really are. And they walk into a board game shop and they go, man, and they see Catan and they see Ticket to Ride and they go, oh, those are cool. I'm familiar. I've heard of those, but like I don't think those are really a 2-player thing, and they're not really. And so they come up to me and they say, hey, what's a good 2-player game? We just really are playing it 2. Is that weird? And I'm like, no, that's totally normal. And there's so many options. Let me talk to you about them. And so now I've just got that added tool in my toolkit as a salesperson in a board game shop to say, hey, have you heard of this game Azul? Because a lot of people have. The base game of Azul has placement in Target, for example. And so it's got that brand name recognition, and the cover is very beautiful. And so people remember, oh, I've seen that game in Target. Oh, I've seen that game on TikTok or whatever. They've seen that. A lot of people have seen that game if they don't know how it works or what it is. They've at least seen it. And so I go, yeah, that game is really cool and popular. And now they've got a 2-player only version of it. And that consumer who's asking that question to me goes, whoa, that's so cool. Oh my gosh, right? And also, again, importantly, the price point's lower. So that person who's just kind of trying to get in is probably not ready to spend $40 on a game. Maybe. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they want to spend $20 on a game. $25 is pushing it, right? So at a $25, I could sell this at $25, for example. The MSRP is like 20, it's some goofy number. It's like 27, whatever. So I could sell this at 25. Let's just round down to 25. And that's like, that's a really good price point for a person who is board game curious. I've played games before and I've enjoyed them, but I'm not ready to commit and spend to a big game. They want something small and light dip the toes in, get an appetizer. And this is perfect for that type of person who's heard of Azul, wants to do a player game, and doesn't want to spend a ton of money. When you make these types of products, they're smaller. You don't have to include the components for up to 4 players. So it's pretty much always going to be cheaper, which is, again, in the sales perspective, good. Reduces the price point. It lowers the barrier to entry from a financial perspective. The other point is that, in my perspective as a store owner, some people, I've seen this happen countless times, people come in and they'll buy Splendor Duel, for example, or Seven Wonders Duel, and they'll come back a month later and they'll say, man, we played that Seven Wonders Duel game and we loved it. It was so cool. And then they say, we kind of want to get the original game so that when we have friends over, we can play that too. And actually, you pick up an additional sale from there being 2 SKUs of the same game. Now, that doesn't always happen, and sometimes it's cannibalizing itself. But in my experience, a lot of the time, people will come in and either just get a different 2-player game. They'll say, hey, we like that Seven Wonders Duel. What else you got for 2 players? Or they'll say, okay, cool, we had that 2-player experience, but now we're really looking for something to cover a bigger player count. And it's very easy for me to say, well, that game is based on this other game that goes up to 4 or 5, whatever player count it is. And if you have more people over, you could just play that same game. You've already learned half of it, basically. And they go, yeah, you're right. And then here's the beautiful thing when it does happen, right? They go home, and they buy Seven Wonders Original, and they go home and play it with 7 people. And now, 5 new people, outside of the original 2, played Seven Wonders, and they go, man, that was so fun, we liked that. But what if we're playing at 2 players? Do I have the product for you? Seven Wonders Duel. And it's this really beautiful, organic product circle. That's very idealistic, obviously. It does happen, not all the time, but it does happen. I hope that I've been clear in what I've been trying to say. I'm trying to separate my opinions as like gamer versus shop owner, but they happen to cohere in this case. I think this is just a good thing. It's a good thing. I don't mind this industry trend that every game needs a duel. Even if it's good at 2 players, that's fine. So I think it's cool. It's more complex than the base game of Azul, which is good for me, but might not be good for you. I think it's cheaper than the base game. Sorry, I don't think. I know it's cheaper than the base game of Azul, which is good from a shop owner's perspective. This is easier to sell than the base game of Azul, so that's good. And also, a little shout out, because it just released, it's gonna come for while supplies last. It's gonna come with these little release promo, tape these to the box. But these are like little release promo tile things, so that's fun.